One point that I want to make up front to this video, which I forgot in my initial recording, is that the camera is mounted on my chin. I'm using a chin mount, so the size of the windscreen is not as tall as it's going to look like from the vantage point of the camera right now. So just be aware of that. And as I am about to mention a little bit later in the video, you can look at the link at the bottom of the video from my previous video where I do show this windscreen overlaid with the stock windscreen, which allows you to get a sense for how big it actually is in practice and what it looks like. So don't overestimate the size of it based on the camera angle. In particular, I want to clarify that from the perspective of my eyes, I am not looking through the windshield at any point in time when I'm in traffic or doing anything reasonable. Unless I'm looking straight down, I'm looking up above the windscreen, so it is not in my way. Alright, this is an update regarding the Wunderlich Marathon windshield. I did a first impressions a few weeks ago or whenever it was. Since then I have ridden, I think, a little over 1,000 miles, but if not, then at the very least pretty close to 1,000 miles with the windscreen on. I will start with the one thing that you should be aware of, which is that because of its size, it can cause your, at full lock, you may collide with the windshield. So this is a stock 1300, pretty much, like aside from like levers and whatever. And at full lock, when the windshield is in the lower position, I do slightly collide with the windshield. The mirrors collide a little bit. Now, of course, I could adjust the mirrors a little bit so that they don't. So, you know, it's not the end of the world. And they also, the way they're set up right now for me, they collide a little bit. Like, they just barely collide. It doesn't break anything. Like, I can go full lock. It will slightly bend some of the plastic, but it's not too bad. I will at the end I will show a clip of what it looks like, so you can see what I'm talking about. Otherwise, for everything else about it is pretty much positive with a few caveats. You can look at I will link my previous video in the description if you want to see how big it is in relation to the old windshield. The previous video has me sort of showing them overlaid on top of each other, and you can get a sense for how big it is. The observations in that previous video have pretty much held up, in the sense that I am very happy with it. I have no reason to, try another windshield or something like that. I am not 100% in the cocoon of sort of silence, so to speak. If I duck down a little bit at freeway speeds, I will get a little bit better protection than when I'm sitting up. But it's good enough that it's just not an issue. I do not have an issue with needing, unreasonably high volume to be able to hear like a podcast or something like that while at freeway speeds. I do not worry at all about any kind of hearing issues, and of course I'm riding with ear protection. If you don't, that's a whole other game. But basically, having ridden it quite far now, with winds in different directions and all of that stuff, I can very confidently say that for me, and we'll get to my circumstances, it is a very, very good upgrade. I absolutely regret nothing. This was an awesome purchase, and it very much improves the overall sort of touring suitability of the bike. And in terms of me, right, so I am 6 foot tall, and I have an inseam that, like, my riding pants right now do have a 32-inch inseam. I don't know how that translates to other people, because I'm a little bit weirdly shaped and whatever, so I don't take that for gospel. But those are the two metrics that I kind of have to give you to allow you to compare with your own situation, right? So of course, if you have a different height, it may be more or less effective. I will say that when I stand up a little bit on this and sort of see what it's like if I were a little bit taller, I still find that it's noticeably better than the old windscreen, than the stock windscreen. But it's hard. I can't really say how good it is over time and so on, because obviously I'm not riding around for 2 hours standing up slightly by an extra inch or two, right, just to see what that's like. So I'm not making any promises there. One data point that may be of interest is that I am riding with my Klim Krios Pro dual sport helmet, and it has a beak on it. I'm not riding with the beak removed or anything. And at highway speeds, even when doing head checks, I do not notice the beak, right? So for context, beaks are typically cited as something that, you know, catches the wind, and like it can be uncomfortable and whatever, and it can sort of cause neck strain and stuff like that. But with the windscreen, I do not notice it, right? If I lower it to the lowest position, then I certainly do. And so the beak would be a noticeable trade-off at highway speeds under those conditions. But with this windscreen all the way up, it's as if the beak does not exist from a wind perspective, right? So there's absolutely no issue to the point where I don't even notice it, right? I mean, if I had side by side, if I could compare it side by side, I can't promise that there's literally no difference. I'm sure there's a small difference, but I am just not like actively noticing it as I'm riding, as I'm head checking and so on. So that's really good. If you are taller than me, I am not entirely sure, and I haven't seen it in person, but the Puig touring windscreen, I believe that is expected to be even larger than this. I could be wrong about that, so do not hold me accountable, just suggesting that that is something that you might want to look into. I had one of those on order as well, because I wasn't sure which one would actually show up first, but the Puig was still on back order by the time this one arrived, so I canceled that. But that's an option that I'm aware of, that if you are taller than 6 foot and you're worried about it, or if you got the windscreen and it's not tall enough for you, maybe that's an option, right? I just have not tried it in person. I've watched Big Rock Moto's video on it, and like showing not on the 1300 but on another bike, and it certainly, I think it was 1250 if I remember correctly. It's certainly really, really big, right? But I haven't actually compared the specs and so on. He was complaining that it was too big and wanted to consider shaving it off, or not shaving it off, what do you call it? Cutting it, basically, to make it shorter. I don't know if he ever did. So, yeah, that's about it. And one quick note, as I'm stopped here on the side of the road for a little bit, that I forgot to mention, off-roading. So, if you're off-roading and you want to stand up, at least in my personal experience, the height of the windshield is not a problem. Just put it in the lowest position, and it's totally fine. I've never had an issue. I haven't bumped into it, even with my camera sticking out of my helmet and so on. Of course, again, I'm 6 foot, 32 inch inseam, so mileage may vary if you're a shorter person, right? Just keep that in mind, that if you are off-roading and standing up, a taller windshield is going to have potentially a difference for you there. And to be crystal clear, when I am off-road, I have the windshield in the lowest position. Otherwise, the situation would be different. So in conclusion, with the exception of the fact that you might be colliding with the handlebars, that is really the only thing that is not perfect. And it's not like I can complain. The size is there for a reason, and it contributes to wind protection. So it's not like I can say that it should be done any differently, right? It's just a thing to be aware of if that is a concern for you. Here's a clip of me demonstrating the collision issue. All right, here we are. So this is what I'm talking about. Just to give you a good look at how these are mounted, so you can tell, maybe relative to yours, whether it's going to be an issue or not. If I go to full lock right now with the windscreen in its upwards position, it's not a problem. It fits under there. If I get it down here, you'll see that it does just barely touch. If I go full lock, if you look at, now it's touching, and then full lock, right? So it bends, I don't know what it is, maybe 3/4 of an inch. Probably not a good thing, probably not good to do that a lot, but it doesn't immediately kind of make everything explode, right? So this is mostly an issue if you're either off-road, because you want this down if you're standing up off-road, or if you're just started the bike. So this particular bike, as you may be aware, if you have it and you're considering this windscreen, right, it'll keep the windscreen in the low position until you start going at a certain speed or some number of seconds, whatever the criteria is, and it goes up. So if you're doing low speed maneuvers like in your driveway at full lock and you want to avoid that, you're going to have to remember to get the windscreen up before you do that, or avoid going to full lock. So yeah, that's what it looks like.